One of the things I've been thinking about is almost like historical jealousy. And this is where the body count conversation comes in. What have you come to believe about how much body count matters, and then how can people deal with historical jealousy better?
Well, the thing is, it's now become a big topic of debate, and men are like, oh, body count, body count, body count. It's a big deal. Here's what I really say about body count. The testament of your body count is more your rejection rate than how many people you slept with. Now, if you are, let's take for somebody like you, for example, who's got a big name on social media, looks great, access to loads of women through the nightclub. Now, if your body count is, let's say if it's 10, but you've had hundreds of girls throwing themselves at you, yours is actually still low. Whereas if another guy who has no access to women, but finally gets 1 or 2 girls to sleep with him, on paper it might be less, but his rejection rate is so low. And now instead of looking at how many people sleep with, look at their rejection rate. Now if a girl has slept with 5 men or 10 men, but only 5 or 10 men have tried to approach her, that means every man that tries gets access. But if she's a really attractive woman, she might have higher, but her rejection rate is higher. So really look at how many people your partner is rejecting rather than just their body count, because on paper a really unattractive man who has nothing going for him, his body count's going to be low. Doesn't mean he's a decent man. It's just that he didn't have the opportunity. Similarly, women that are not that nice to be around, not that kind, not that pretty, not that attractive, hers is going to be low. Doesn't mean she's virtuous. It's just that she didn't have access. It's the ones that have access but choose to be selective. That's what you should be looking at, is their selectivity.
Problem is, you can't ask them the number, how many rejections have you done in your life?
Yes, you can't. That's the hard part. But what you can tell is how easily excited this person is by the opposite gender. It comes quite naturally. You can tell when people are super excited when the opposite gender pays some attention, and other people who are totally immune to it. That person that has a glee attached to attention is always going to maybe not have a higher body count because they might not get access, but they've got more risk of diversion because they get too much ego boost from the opposite sex and not from other areas of their life. So I think body count really has to depend on the person's ability to say no to sex. It's not just how many people they slept with, but how many people can they say no to.
I've never heard this frame before. I think it's very interesting.
What do you think about that? What do you think?
The body count conversation is so skewed because the world that we're living in now is not representative of where it would have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But the thing that I'm most interested in is historical jealousy. Yeah. So hearing stories about what your partner used to get up to, even if it happened once, right? And it's so strange. You didn't even know that they existed. You didn't know them. They didn't know you. They couldn't have said no because they were waiting for you to come. Maybe this was a one-time thing or whatever. And it triggers, especially in men, it triggers such a visceral fear, right? Of inadequacy, of like jealousy. But it's strange. Like, how can you be jealous about a thing that happened before you even knew who your partner was? So talk me through your conception of historical jealousy.
What happens with historical jealousy is human beings in general, we prefer pain we can predict. Predictable pain is almost more welcome than definitely more welcome than anything. Now, what we do with retroactive jealousy is we hold on to the past as a way of predicting how they're going to hurt us in the future. The more you're anxious you are, the more you perceive threats in your environment. So what's happened with people who are jealous of the past is essentially they have a core belief that their partner's going to hurt them at some stage anyway. Now, if there's no present day evidence for that, they will look for it in the past and use that as a way of creating hypothesis of how they might hurt you in the future, and therefore be mentally prepared for the sabotage. Now, so essentially what they're doing is preparing themselves for the worst, but they can't find evidence, so they look for the past, and it's usually because of a fear of abandonment that they have within themselves. And I know it's more common in men because their fear is more stimulated by the fear of cuckoldry, that she might, evolutionary wise, she might have a child with somebody else and pretend it's yours, that fear. So it's ingrained in them. But more time, that fear is activated when there's been some childhood abandonment.
What about women? Rejection. What are women worried about?
We worry not as much about retro. We only really worry about previous exes if there is some financial or emotional investment still going on, usually when there's kids. So what happens is women tend to get jealous of the ex-wife where they've got kids and stuff like that. We get jealous of exes that are still a priority in their resources. So we're only threatened by women that have access to the resources, whether that's energy, time, or money. But if he's not giving them that, we are more worried about future threats.
That's interesting. I imagine that must make a lot of the moving on, starting a new relationship as a guy that has got some history. Earlier on, you mentioned
kids.
If you're going to go for somebody that's a little bit older, it may be even in some regards a green flag that they've been through some relationships and got some baggage, from that. But you also have the
jealousy,
inclusion of the previous partner and potentially the previous kid, resources, attention, so on and so forth. So that must be a difficult situation to navigate.
A lot of women suffer from that. They're really, really so jealous of the ex and the children and so on and so forth. And it is very difficult. I can imagine it would be horrible. But one thing that, again, if your husband has a good co-parenting relationship and is a good father, it's a foresight into how good of a partner he will be to you and your children. He prioritizes his children is really, really important. Now, a lot of women want a man to prioritize them over their children, but what kind of man is that? A man that prioritizes a woman over his children, what kind of man is that? It's not a man you're going to be attracted to in the future, especially when you have children with him, because that means the next woman in his life can take that priority. You need a man that prioritizes his children, and try and see it as something you admire in him rather than jealous of him, because it's a trait that's going to come in very handy when you have children with him, God willing. But that guy that is just all over the place and doesn't prioritize his kids, it's only handy in the short term.
There was a post on Instagram that I saw literally on the car on the way here. When you find out that she's unvaxxed, not a feminist, loves the Lord and aspires to be a wife, mother and homemaker, and it's Joe Rogan in the video going, oh, it's a comedy thing. And the caption was, do such unicorns still exist? In the comments, people were dating. So girls were replying and saying, you should come to church on a Sunday. We still exist out there, like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But what I'm fascinated by is what is going on where unvaxxed, not a feminist, loves the Lord, aspires to be a wife, mother, and homemaker, is like a counterculture finding a bar of gold hidden in the sand treasure.
It is because we're so distracted by the women that aren't. The reality is that we're so bombarded with images of the women who are the opposite, who are the feminists, who are out there, who are not really of the Lord and don't really aspire to that. We see they're the loudest. So we see them on social media. They might be the ones that sexualize themselves a lot more. They might be the ones that put themselves out there. So what men are gravitating towards visually is going to be that filter of that kind of woman, the opposite. And the ones that they're ignoring visually tend to have those qualities. So here's the thing in life, everything comes at a compromise. Now, if you want somebody that will stimulate you the most sexually, she's not going to be a virgin. She's not going to be on church on Wednesdays. She's just not going to be that girl. She might be somebody who's a little bit more conventional. If you want somebody who is going to be those, you might have to compromise. Now, what's happening is because we've become so shallow and we value so many junk values, such as so many superficial things like looks, when she's not beautiful, you don't even pay attention to her. So if she's not the most stunning girl, it doesn't matter what qualities she have. She becomes invisible. A bit like with men. If they're not tall, a lot of women will ignore their existence, even if they've got all the other great traits. Similarly, if she's not absolutely sexy, is what men are now attracted to. They're looking for sexy more than ever before because it's normalized, it's Instagram, it's pornography. If she's not sexy, they don't even notice that woman. So that's why they think women like this are unicorns, but they are there. You just don't notice them because they don't have their boobs on your For You page.
Why do you think infidelity occurs most commonly in your experience?
I would honestly say if you ever get cheated on, I know people hate me for this, but it's usually your fault. And the reason I say that, particularly with men, a cheating woman shows you every red flag from day one. If you choose to ignore red flags, you'll pay the price. In life, you pay prices. There's price tags. Now, everybody shows you that the cheaters show you they're going to be a cheat. And how they show it is very simple. Their values. They'll show you that they've done it in the past. Maybe they show you that they are not so traditional. Maybe they show you that they don't believe in monogamy. Maybe they're addicted to pornography. Cheaters show you their past. They show you everything. Now, if you don't want to get cheated on, you either choose that cheater but know what the score is, and then you don't get hurt, or you know what's going to happen. But ignoring red flags is always going to land you in that position. Now, whenever I have clients that have been cheated on a lot for 5-6 years, a man's got another mistress, or 3 years she's still been talking to her ex, I was like, there's no way she can get to 3 years without you consenting. And they're like, what do you mean by that? I was like, they would have been late replies, there would have been days their phones are off, there would have been not telling you where they're going. They tell you everything. Their social media would have suggested something. You would have been questioning them sometimes, and they would have got defensive rather than reassuring you. they would have been signs. You chose to ignore them. The price you pay for that, unfortunately, is infidelity. So you either accept an unfaithful and know what they're doing, and then just decide, okay, I can accept it, but I'd rather be with you than not without you. But denying the red flags is always, it's going to catch up on you. The infidelity is going to occur. So that's why people get cheated on. Why people choose to do it is because they can get the comfort of a relationship with the joy and pleasure of an alternative connection. So they get two in one. So they might get the comfort of somebody who pays her bills, but the sex life of a young personal trainer that she wants. And he might get the comfort of a good wife, but then the sexual experience of a escort when he goes and does that. So we become so greedy. We don't realize that some things have to involve a sacrifice. A healthy marriage has to involve sacrificing the alternatives. We don't see the need to sacrifice alternatives because now we are so gluttonous. Even if we eat a lot, we can still do that and get surgery. Even if we spend a lot, we can still get credit cards. We no longer see the sacrifice of alternatives as required in order for positive outcomes.